I am Marianne Herzog. I am a specialist for trauma on the field of education. I worked as a specialist for students with migration background in the education department of Basel, Switzerland. Nowadays, I work as a lecturer at different universities and institutions in Switzerland and all over Europe. Thank you so much for the invitation to the International Bildungsforum Spielmarkt Potsdam. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to talk about a safe place, especially in difficult circumstances. I refer to trauma pedagogy, which can support students, teachers, and other people to identify their safe place to enhance their mental health. This presentation also refers to the results of our project, Yestermorrow. It is an Erasmus project. There were 6 different countries involved. When I worked at the education department of Basel, I was counseling especially teachers. And one day they called me and asked if I could come and see them. They might have quite difficulties with a student. This student, coming from Nigeria, being for 9 months in Switzerland, didn't talk, didn't make anything at school, and the teachers, they felt very helpless, very ineffective. Her mother met a Swiss in the internet, and she decided to leave her country and to go to Switzerland to marry this man. She left her daughter, Beauty, behind, but Beauty also decided to leave Nigeria and to go to Switzerland. Her trip took more than 2 years. Finally, she arrived in Switzerland. The situation was completely different than in her own country. She had a new family, another culture, another language. She went to school and she started quite quickly to learn German. But obviously, after 9 months, the teachers, they didn't know how to cope anymore with the difficult situation, and they asked me to come. It was during a handicraft lesson. I was sitting next to Beauty, and she wanted to sew something. She tried to make a knot in a thread, but she was not successful. She couldn't manage it, and she tried again and again and again and again and again. The teacher had this feeling of ineffectiveness, of helplessness. For the moment, I would like to leave this example here. We will come back afterwards. These are the titles of the presentation. First, I would like to have a quick look at the psychological trauma. A traumatic experience is when there is a lot of stress and when my ability to cope with this stress is not at the same level as the stress is. This provokes a traumatic experience. Another definition focuses on the feeling of helplessness, of ineffectiveness. There are many other definitions of trauma, but I would like to focus on these both. Today, we know much more about the brain and how it functions thanks to functional brain imaging and thanks to neurobiological science. And it is very important that this knowledge enters into daily school life. Trauma pedagogy is a possibility to embed this knowledge in daily school life. It is a positive pedagogy. It is the pedagogy about the safe place. When we know very well how the brain is working, especially under pressure, we can understand our emotions much better. We can understand our reactions much better and the emotions and the reactions of the person we are dealing with. Additionally, when we know a lot about transference phenomena, it can help to install the safe place even better. When we have the safe place, we can give it to other persons and we can focus on effectiveness, on resources. We can identify fragmentations and try to unite fragmented things. I would like to explain you how the brain is working. One problem is that we can't reach our knowledge when we are under pressure. Therefore, we have simplified the organic cerebral effects to make it easily to remember. Images can be stored and retrieved better than words. In the following model, the throne is the symbol of power. Whoever is sitting on it rules, and normally rationality rules. When rationality, reason, is on the throne, it is a perfect situation. We reach our memories, we are in a good contact with other people, we can learn. What we see here, there is a kind of outlook man. The outlook man belongs to a very old part of our brain. It is the limbic system. The real name for the outlook man is amygdala. And in the amygdala, we have a lot of knowledge stored. Information can be stored in the outlook man about traumatic experiences during different generations before. We are talking about 3 generations. Information can be stored about the pregnancy, about birth, and about the first 2 or 3 years after birth. I take all these memories together because all these memories can't be reached intentionally. Only when we get language at the age of 2 or 3, then afterwards it's easier to get in contact with our memories and to talk about. But before, all this knowledge about generations, pregnancy, birth, the first 2 years after birth, we can't reach intentionally. It is not in the narrative memory, but they exist, and they can have an influence on our dealing. When the outlook man identifies a danger, and he knows what a danger is because he has collected all this knowledge, then he rings a bell That means there are hormones coming out. They don't touch reason, rationality. They directly go to the limbic system, where there is another part, the reptilian brain. Normally, the reptilian brain is like standby, is sleeping. When the hormones arrive, the reptilian brain is awakening, and there is a change on the throne. Now the lizard, the reptilian, is on the throne. There are some advantages. Reason, rationality is very slow. The reptilian brain is extremely fast. There are only 3 ways he can deal with. It is fight, flight, or freeze. The reaction of freeze is only then chosen when fight and flight are not possible. For 10,000 of years, this process has been a very successful strategy to cope with deadly threats. And when the deadly threat is over, the lizard leaves the throne and rationality comes back. When rationality is on the throne, the memories of this time are very well arranged. There are little books filled with these memories, and it's easy to find them again afterwards. When the lizard is on the throne, it's completely different. It does not organize experiences. They can't be understood later in context. They cannot link to the past. They are fragmented. And these fragments, they are not held in a book, but they are flying around, and they can touch the Outlook man. And the Outlook man, he can't check in the books. Is it really dangerous? Is it a danger from the past, which is not anymore really dangerous? Or is it from the very moment? That means even in a safe place, the lizard can sit on the throne. We have people, they fight, they fly, or they even freeze. A person who has the lizard on the throne is not capable to learn, to step in a good contact with other people, to remember. And therefore, it is very important that we identify students when they have the lizard on the throne and to help them to get back to rationality, to reason. When we try to train a student, a child, to cope better with a special situation, then we put this knowledge in the brain, the rationality in reason. But now we have experienced that reason, rationality is not involved when the lizard is on the throne. And that's why this training is not really helpful. People, students, children, they have very often the lizard on the throne. They need the safe place. They need the safe place to learn new strategies to cope with dangerous situations. How many students are traumatized? Very often they are not diagnosed. There are students with traumatic experiences. Therefore, it's very helpful to know more about trauma and its impact on students. A secure attachment is the best way to avoid trauma. What is needed to develop a secure attachment? An adult person is needed who gives an appropriate and sensitive response to the baby. A secure attachment is developed in early childhood. We talk about the first 2 or 3 years. It can be a mother or a father. It can be another person too. When a trauma is acute, then it is very normal that we have a poor memory, that there is avoidance, alertness, difficulties to concentrate, flashbacks, unexpected flashbacks. These are completely normal reactions of an insane situation. These reactions should fade more and more. If they don't fade, we have to ask for help. Man-made disasters lead more often to persistent traumatizations than natural disasters. When a person who should give me comfort, support, is the persecutor, this leads to heavier traumatization. Very often, schools are not directly involved in traumatic experiences. Bullying is an exception. Therefore, we need to have a very close look at bullying, especially nowadays with internet bullying. Here are the causes for psychological trauma. There is an acute trauma and there is a persistent trauma. Persistent trauma, that means that the trauma didn't heal, that it is still persisting. When we work at school, there are all these causes on the left side, and additionally, there is the persistent trauma of neglect in early childhood. In school, we are always too late. Neglect in early childhood can change a life of a child in an extreme way. They have difficulties to trust adult persons. They have difficulties to comfort themselves. It can be very difficult for a child to manage school life. I would like to present charged transferences. What we see here between Adela and her father, there are a lot of positive emotions. We don't know if Adela started to look at her father or her father looked at her. We don't know. But the feeling is going from one person to the other, and it is getting bigger and bigger in a very positive way. It is kind of overwhelming positive feeling between the two persons here. We had a look at the organic cerebral effects. Hopefully, with these images, we can remember them much better. And now I would like to present the transference phenomena. Here too, we have chosen images because on the field of transferences, we have a lot of difficult emotions. People with fragmented memories, They try to get rid of them. These triggers lead to actions. These actions can be understood as self-healing attempts of the soul, hoping that this action leads to a happy end and the problem can be solved. At the same time, the action unconsciously leads to a failure. This fact provokes a retraumatization and even can strengthen the trauma disorder. It is like a red carpet, which is the invitation for us to step on it and to act up in the play of the trauma. If we don't step on the red carpet and we don't enter in this play, we can stay in ourself. It makes new outcomes possible. The trauma pedagogy can help to identify how to find a good way to escape of the trauma play. A very simple and powerful method is the concept of the good reason. Typically, we have strong feelings in our dealings with heavily traumatized children and young people. These feelings can be transferred. If we don't recognize them as transferences, we risk illness through this exposure. Very often, transferences are mixed up with the own feeling of the professional. They can be linked to the own biography. We feel attracted to a special position, for instance, to the position of a rescuer, of a victim, or persecutor. If we recognize them as transferences, we can help to guide the people to new outcomes. If we don't recognize them, we will reenact with them their traumatic experiences. With transferences, they lead us in a position of a rescuer, of a victim, or of a persecutor. They don't do it intentionally. It is very important to come back to the position to myself in the middle. There I have good connections to my own skills and knowledge, and I can build up a sustainable relationship with students. Transferential dynamics are powerful traps. As professionals interacting with impacted students, it's important to identify these dynamics to stay ourselves in a good mental health and to be able to build up a sustainable relationship with those students. How can we avoid the red carpets? The concept of the good reason can help. It is the sentence, you might have a good reason that you. With this concept, we admit that the student has a good reason for his difficult, disturbing behavior, even if this behavior is not acceptable for us. You might have a good reason that, and it is important that it is a good reason, not a reason. You might have a reason. You might have a good reason that. Very often it works without words. It is an attitude. And then there is the letter G like gift. With charge transferences, we get a lot of gifts we wouldn't like to get. But if we understand them as a gift, as a concordant transference, then we can open them, we can try to understand the actions of the person we are dealing with, Based on this information, we can try to find out pedagogical ways to deal with this person in a good way, to find new outcomes with them. Therefore, it's very helpful to get these gifts. Now I come back to Beauty, the girl who left Nigeria after her mother left her country. She was 2 years on the way to Switzerland. We can't imagine what happened during these 2 years. And she arrived in a new culture, in a country with a new language. I assume that there were a lot of traumatic experiences during these 2 years. As people working on the field of pedagogy, we don't have to know what happened. It is different to people working on the field of therapy. On the pedagogic field, it is enough when we see that beauty transfers a lot of difficult emotions, especially these emotions of ineffectiveness, of helplessness. I assume that there are gifts. There are not the real feelings of these teachers, and therefore it is not their ineffectiveness, helplessness. If they understand that this ineffectiveness and this helplessness is linked to beauty and linked to her experiences during these 2 years, it is much easier dealing with beauty than before. Again, here it is a question of attitude. When you understand that it doesn't have to do anything with your own person, but it has to do with the difficult experiences in Nigeria, on the trip to Switzerland, at the arrival in Switzerland, we can leave these transferences behind. We can take the gifts to understand beauty much better. I talked to these teachers, we analyzed the situation, and they agreed that there could be concordant transferences. For them, it was a relief. They understood beauty much better and they could build up another relationship to her. They didn't talk to Beauty, but after some weeks, they came back to me and told me that the situation is much better. Beauty is starting to talk. Beauty is starting to get in contact with them in a good way, and the situation went in a good direction. I would like to present you an example to understand better this difficult topic of transferences. There is a school. There is a new student came to school. It was the first day. He came too late and he came without parents. And so he directly stepped in, he smashed the door and stood in front of the class. When all the students looked at him, he made this sign. When you remember the triangle, then you see that he is in the position of a persecutor. The students are in the position of a victim. But now it changes very quickly. The students, they change into the persecutor, and he is now a victim. The teacher, she is overwhelmed by the situation. She is in the position of the persecutor and tells him, go out and come back to our classroom like everybody is entering the classroom. It is a situation which took perhaps 5, 6, 7 seconds. As a specialist for traumatized students, I would like to have a look behind the curtains. When a student is acting up like that with a lot of emotions, provoking a lot of dynamics, it's worth to have a closer look at. If we understand these actions, they can tell us a lot. In this case, they can tell us that he is not accepted. The charged transferences are so strong, it could be that he wasn't accepted when he was a little child. Difficult experiences in early childhood provoke heavier emotions, heavier dynamics than difficult examples they happen later. When we understand this acting, we can deal in another way the next time. We could take him. I wouldn't touch a child like that, but nevertheless, I could give him a hug from a certain distance, and I could tell him, oh, it might be difficult to step in a new classroom. Here is your table. Please sit down. It is a new way. It would lead him, hopefully, back to the position in the middle, to the green position, when the teacher is able to stay in this green position too. And when we learn to have a look behind the curtains, we can identify hypotheses. And hypotheses help us to act in a new way, in a better way, to find a new way out. Traumatized children, they confront us as teachers, therapists, social workers with their trauma, whether we like it or not. They reenact their stories in their daily life, in school life, and they transfer their experience of traumatic attachment. When I go back to this student coming in, stepping in the classroom, putting everybody out of the green position in the red positions, it came out later on that he really had a very difficult time when he was a little child. He was not accepted by his mother and by his father. He was treated in a very, very bad way. So he was heavily traumatized. There was no secure attachment. I would like to invite you to identify your own examples when you were driven out from myself to the position of a victim, a rescuer, a persecutor. And now we arrive at part 3 of the presentation, The Safe Place. I would like to come back to the differences between the lizard and reason. When reason is on the throne, we have the memories organized in these little books, invisible books, of course. They are well organized, chronically organized, and they are reachable at every time. And this basement let the good self-esteem of this person grow. If the lizard is on the throne, it's completely different. Of course, there are memories too, but these memories are fragmented. They are not organized in little invisible books. It is a huge mess. These fragments are triggers, and these triggers are flying around. From time to time, they touch the Outlook man. The Outlook man can't check if this fragment, if this trigger relates to an actual situation or relates to the past. and he gets alarmed. And again, we have the lizard on the throne. We have even more fragments, and the situation gets more and more difficult. And people with a lot of fragments, they try to get rid of them. They hope that reason is sitting on the throne and will write the situation down in these invisible books. But at one moment, reason is leaving the throne, the lizard will sit on the throne, and then we have the same story once again. There is no new outcome, but it is the same story. When we remember this little boy stepping into the classroom, he told us his story again. Nobody loves me. Nobody can stand me. They send me away. Therefore, trauma pedagogy is very important. It helps us to identify these old stories and to give them new outcomes. We can lead these persons to a happy end. Therefore, it's very important to remember these images. And now, I would like to have a closer look at the safe place. We learned quite important things about our brain, how it works under pressure. And we heard about transferences. Only a safe place makes it possible that the old, highly efficient strategies are given up and new alternative behaviors can be installed. And this safe place was a very important topic in our project about mental health. It was this Erasmus Plus project with 6 different schools in different countries. Most of these schools had financial problems. Therefore, we identified instruments and techniques to install the safe place, which didn't cost anything. Here, there were our partners from Rome. It was a vocational school. There were students between 18 and 28. Most of them were young migrants. The only thing everybody had was the mobile phone. And they used the mobile phone to link everybody. And when they were in troubles, then they could send a message to their teachers. It was a really good feeling among this group, and it was very helpful to give these students support and the feeling of a safe place. Next example is Marriott School in Stevenage. It is about 50 kilometers away from London. I knew the school as a very old building. It was in an extremely bad shape. A little bit later, they built up a new school. And before they started to construct it, they identified the places where the safe place was not guaranteed. There were especially the toilets. They built the toilets completely different. There were thick walls protecting the students, but where they washed their hands, it was open. Apparently, there was a lot of bullying before, so you could overview it now. And at the same time, it is a symbol. It is the symbol that adults take care of the students. They give them a safe place, and at the same time, they look at problems. This changes an atmosphere in a school. Every morning, when the hundreds of students came in, 2 teachers were at the main doors. They greeted the students, "Good morning, hello." At the same time, they were there if any student had a problem, and they could overview if there are any dynamics. Another technique, another method of this school is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method to get the attention of the students. Every teacher, and I think there are more than 300, they do it the same way. They count from 5 to 1 and they show it with their hands. And it is so easy, especially for students with special needs, because everybody does it the same way. And at the same time, it shows that the cooperation of the teachers is very good. Here is the example of the Polish school, Przemysl. It's near the Ukrainian border. They pay a lot of attention to transitions. Every year, after the students came back from the big holidays and new students are entering the school, they do a special day. They go for hiking, they eat together, they play together, they integrate the new students. It's the integration day. The Romanian school is an expert of the safe place. This knowledge bases on generations. Nearly 900 years ago, farmers from the area of Mosul of Rhine went to the area of Romania. They settled there and they had the duty to defend this place against the Turkish armies. They built these fortified churches. At the right side, you see one of these churches. The fortified churches, they had two kinds of protections. On one hand, they had God to protect them, and on the other side, they had big walls around them. The school was built next to the church, and when there was a danger, the students were very quickly behind the safe walls. Those people, they know a lot about the safe place because they had to identify it over hundreds of years to survive. These former Saxon villages are now inhabited by Roma families. It is needed to integrate them. Most of these Roma families are not well educated. There is illiteracy. They are not interested that their children go to school. It's poverty. They don't have jobs. And very often there is domestic violence. To cope with these problems, different players are working together. We have the priest of the Romanian Orthodox Church, we have the mayor, we have NGOs, we have the school, the psychiatrist. They all work together as a real good team. They make one step after the other and have quite some success. The circumstances are very challenging. 6 years ago, we decided to create a book about the safe place. In the meantime, the book is translated in 13 languages besides German. Of course, in English too, in many rather unusual languages, Somali, Tigrinya, Farsi, Arabic. So please have a look at my website. There you find all the translations. There are 3 children. It is Lily, Amit, and Ben. They don't want to go to school. They set off for new adventures. Very soon they enter an awful wood. And if you have a look at these 3 children, you see there is no safe place. They can't learn They can't listen. They can't enter in a good social contact with others. And it gets even worse. They are falling and falling until they are held by soft pillows. And Annalena is there. She greets them and offers them their favorite cookies and a wonderful tea. She tells them, you might have a good reason that you are not at school. And they start to talk. Annalena asks them if they know anything about the Outlook Man, about the lizard, and the children listen to her. They are very interested. And Omid, who never can sleep, he falls asleep. They ask Annalena, why can't we pay attention here? At school, it is impossible, but here we love listening to you. And Annalena says, yeah, because it's a safe place. A little bit later, she sends them back to school, but the children, they don't want to leave Annalena. She gives them a transition object. They took their objects and they took the safe place with them. They listen to it, they smell it, they feel it, and then they leave Annalena. And they cross this wood again, but this time, because the safe place is with them, this forest is a nice forest. It is bright. There is a little monster, but Lily, she has her bell with her. She rings the bell and the monster disappears. Now they are back at school, ready to learn, ready for new tasks. One part of this book is psychoeducation. It is important that students and their parents know how the brain is working, especially under pressure. It is the Outlook Man, it is brain, it is the lizard. They learn that the lizard is very fast and that he can give 3 orders: fight and flight, and if this is not possible, it is freeze. How do you create your own safe place, especially at work? Please remember, you need a minimal safe place to give it to your students. We talked a lot about the safe place, and now I would like to focus on effectiveness, resources, and avoiding fragmentation. Again, it is a photo of this Erasmus Plus project. That was the meeting in Romania where the students took part, and there were games, they played together, and they lived effectiveness. Ineffectiveness, helplessness is always linked to a traumatic experience. Planting is an important way to live effectiveness. And at the same time, it's the symbol of hope. A little seed corn can grow to an enormous tree. That was a project too. Its name was From Zero to a Hamburger. And we started here with these plants to produce tomatoes. Sometimes we were not really successful. That was when we made ketchup. It took us more than 1 year to produce these hamburgers. And at the end, we put everything together. We made a big party in our school and we had these hamburgers. It was a great experience. We have to activate resources. A wonderful example is this slip here. It is from Marriott School. When a student does an outstanding work, his teacher or her teacher is filling in this slip. She or he sends him or her to the head teacher. The head teacher, she interrupts her work, and the student is talking to her, telling her what he did, what she did. After this talk and the congratulations of the head teacher, the student goes back to his classroom. They told us that a head teacher interrupts her work when there is an emergency. And it's worth to interrupt her work too when there is a very positive situation. This is an excellent example how you can focus on positive things, on resources. And now I would like to talk about fragments. Meanwhile, you know that memories are fragmented when the lizard is sitting on the throne. Therefore, fragments have something to do with traumatic experiences. It's helpful to identify fragments, and it's better to avoid fragments, to unite fragments to a whole. I come back to the example of the school in Romania. There was an excellent cooperation among all players: the church, the school, the health system, municipality, NGOs. If we have to deal with persons with a lot of fragments, these fragments, they could be contagious. We can be infected in the helping system too. We fight against all the other players, and at the end, there is a lot of work, but we don't step forward. Therefore, we have to identify infections by fragmentation. We have to understand that the helping system can be fragmented too. And we have to avoid this fragmentation. If there is an excellent cooperation among all the players helping other people, we can give them a safe place. Please be aware of fragmentation and don't forget that they could be contagious. I would like to thank you.